Welcome to another Mobycon Academy Spotlight session where we shine the light on some of the unseen heroes of the Dutch transportation system. And today we're talking about parking bays and street trees. And to do that, I'm joined by my colleague Nick Falbo. Welcome, Nick. Street trees and parking bays, interesting. What is it? Do we need it? And can we have it in a North American context? First of all, when we look at this image, what stands out to you? Because to a Dutch person, this looked like a very normal residential street.
Yeah, well, I think what stands out to me in this particular photo is the way the parking is integrated into the sidewalk area.
Yeah.
When I look at this, it almost looks like that car is parked on the sidewalk.
Illegally.
Well, yeah.
That's what it
illegally.
looks like.
Is that what's going on?
It is perfectly legal.
It is perfectly
legal. No worries there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it stands out in a way that, it feels like there's something wrong going on. But I think there's a lot of good happening when I look at what's going on in this image.
It looks wrong, but it is good.
Yeah, it looks wrong, but it feels right. Yeah. This definitely, like the way the parked car is like in line with that tree. Yeah. It starts to change my typical understanding of how a street works. Normally it's your sidewalk, your furnishing zone, your roadway. Yeah. This starts to blur those lines.
Yeah, exactly. Intentionally, right? So it's very common practice. Like you've seen it cycling around the city and the Netherlands wider. I guess it's very normal. Dutch people wouldn't even notice, but we do tend to place the trees not on the sidewalk, but in between the parked cars, basically creating parking bays or street tree bays, just depends on how you look at it, to break up that parking lane, which in the US, it's North America in general, it's usually a whole lane, right? You have a whole lane.
Yeah, usually it's a whole lane. It's a whole part of the full roadway cross section. Yeah. And maybe this is kind of born out of necessity with compact streets between tightly spaced buildings, saying where can we overlap different elements of the road? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly what's happening. Like the sidewalk itself is not necessarily, well, this is fairly generous for Dutch standards actually, but it's not necessarily huge. We don't often have a grass verge between the sidewalk and the roadway or between the house frontage and the sidewalk. In countries like Australia and New Zealand, they often will have a grass strip and then just a narrow footpath running along. And they kind of use the grass as the base and then put the footpath on top, while in the Netherlands we pave everything and then carve out some green space again, right? But we do that in a different location than you would normally expect in North American context.
Yeah, and it's so important to make that space for those trees, make that space for that landscaping. Our sidewalks, we usually have the room for your walkway next to this sort of furnishing zone where you've got trees, lampposts, bike parking, all of those elements that sort of go on the side. Yeah. Here, that space gets combined. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it can blend according to the need at a specific purpose. You'll also often see, like, instead of car parking, it'll be bike parking, or it'll be underground rubbish storage or whatever else you need in that furnishing zone, and it can be flex. You sound pretty enthusiastic about this concept. Do we need this in North America?
Oh, yeah, we absolutely need this in North America. There are some examples, I think, and a few cities have been exploring this as a way to get trees on, just a similar context here, trees on sidewalks that are too narrow to get a full furnishing zone. It's where can that go? Well, maybe it can go in the street. Yeah. What I really like about that is the way that it just changes the conversation about what parking is, how it relates to the street, how it's required. Yeah. I think the typical way of thinking about parking is it is just its own lane, the parking lane. Yeah. But I think more progressive American cities are starting to rethink that space itself. It's no longer the parking lane. Sometimes they call it the curb zone. Or I think what you start to see here is that curb zone gets kind of blended with the furnishing zone. And then you can make a very intentional choice of what goes in this space. Is it a parked car, or is it a tree, or is it a bench, or is it any other sort of amenity? Exactly. So it no longer becomes by default a row of 10 cars that you can squeeze onto a street.
Yeah, exactly. It's not so much the amenities versus the cars. The cars just become, or the parking for the cars become one of the amenities you can mix up.
And as a result, you can get, potentially larger trees. I think one of the struggles we have when you look at standard sidewalk widths in North America is that furnishing zone is kind of narrow. And any sort of urban arborist is going to be saying you need more space. They always want more space than you realistically have. But if you start including that adjacent car parking lane into your understanding of that furnishing zone, you can get large canopy trees that really start to change the outcomes when it comes to stormwater management, habitat, shade.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the real benefits, additionally to what you've just said, is that if there's not a huge occupancy of the parked cars, or if there's not that many cars parked on the street, you still get that width reduction, right? An empty American street, like a residential street where everybody has off-street parking, and they still have 2 parking lanes on either side of the street, you have this huge expanse of asphalt that's just so wide and really invites speeding up. With this, you kind of break it up and bring in the curb. The curb to curb becomes much narrower.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got these streets that maybe when they are parked full of cars, they feel, relatively compact. They're okay. But as soon as people leave for the day and they clear that space out, it feels like a runway. And because it's not defined. And by defining that parking lane as not a part of the roadway, through parking bays, through materials, through the way it's integrated into the sidewalk, then you can make sure that 24 hours a day, this roadway continues to be narrow, safe, and calm.
Yeah, perfect. So we need it, but can we have it?
We absolutely can have it. I think you start seeing this in standard designs where you incorporate curb extensions. Maybe the place to start is at the corners. Put those curb extensions in on each corner, and you've already started to create this limited space where parked cars can happen. You start integrating trees at those mid-block points, and you really start to get more out of your roadside.
It does sound a little bit more complex in terms of construction, and I guess that would mean it becomes a little bit more expensive. Is this something that we would normally now do in new developments where the developer pays for the street design?
Yeah, I would hope that most cities can incorporate this into their development standards by default. A local street should have curb extensions that extend into the parking bay. It probably should have different materials in that parking lane. And those can be done if they're in your standards. As new development happens, they will build it hopefully the first time. But when you're retrofitting your old street, those older neighborhoods, it does cost a little bit more to put in a curb extension to deal with the drainage. That's probably the largest impact that a change like this would have.
Yeah. And in terms of curb construction, we're not going to talk about prefab curbs in this episode, but we will at a later stage. But would that be something that's solvable, or would it be prohibitively expensive and developers would just say, well, we can't do that because that drives up the price of housing?
On a totally newly constructed road, I don't think it really is that impactful. It's going to be all starting fresh. Build it the right way the first time. Marginal. Especially looking at some of those features of maybe the car parking being raised up and integrated into the sidewalk, or shifting where that drainage line is. Exactly. I think that's a good opportunity, and it's not going to add too much to that original construction.
Yeah, great. So there's no real obstruction. Is it just a thing that people don't know about or underestimate its impact?
No, I think for new construction, I'd like to think that everyone's building great the first time. I'm sure it's not always happening, but in the kind of world of rebuilding the existing city, that's where that extra costs come into play. And I think that convincing the people that it's worth it to invest in your local streets that way. A lot of cities can probably start on their local street bikeway network, maybe prioritizing where those types of investments take place.
And that's where the shade, especially for the warmer climates,
absolutely,
the shade will be insanely important in the next decades, right? Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks for your insight. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Mobycon Academy Spotlight series, and hope to see you next time.